Earlier this week I made a post about a huge package we received, and some of you have tried to guess the content. Among others, a shower cubicle, glass, navigation chart, an orangutan, and a trampoline. Twice. All very valid possibilities, but the reality is much more boring. At the same time, an absolute necessity, the new floorboards for the rear cabin. These boards are pretty big and heavy, and I'm not even gonna tell you how difficult it was to get these all the way back to the boat. But here they are, or at least some of them. So the first floorboards have arrived here in the boat, which have been provided by Plattenzuschnitt 24. And I'm gonna talk more about the shop and their service in a future video. For now, let's see how we can get those plates cut and fit to go into the floor. First, I need to build a little workstation. For this, I roll out a strip of painting fleece secured on each end. A couple of square timber give me the headroom I need for sawing the boards. A piece of cardboard serves as a template. First, I cut the cardboard as close as possible to the shape of the surrounding hull. Then I transfer the template's shape onto the piece I want to cut. At first I put this tape down because I thought it would help to prevent the wood from splintering. But as you will see in a moment, this turned out not to be necessary. For cutting, I'm gonna use my Makita jigsaw. I have a set of different metal saw blades, which first I'm gonna test. So I'm gonna start with the one that has the smallest teeth. And I have to make sure that I'm in the right mode. We only want it to go up and down, not forward and backward. So let's do a first little test, because I have never worked with this kind of wood before. The first saw blade I tested worked so well that I didn't even have to do more tests. So on with the first actual cut. And then a first test fitting to see what else we have to remove. And then I repeat this process of test fitting and trimming and test fitting again, back and forth, until the piece fits perfectly. And just to mention, with this jigsaw and saw blade combination, one can cut very small radius. Alright, we're almost there, the last little bits and pieces to cut away. And for the very fine trimming, I can actually use an angle grinder with a sandpaper disc. Okay, so the first board is in. There's maybe a few millimeters here or there that I need to fine trim, but overall it sits pretty well, and especially here I have it where I want it to be. So I'm gonna continue with the second board, and the difficult part here is gonna be how to accommodate spaces for these metal parts. Alright, so let's do that. And I'm gonna run through this a bit faster, because the process is basically the same of cutting and fitting and trimming. Et voila! And at this point I can say that this job is much easier than I expected. Of course we'll have to wait for the end result to show that, but so far it works pretty well. Here I cut away some strips on the other extremities of this piece to make it fit properly on the angle profiles. I cut the wood so that it occupies about half of the angle profile, leaving enough space for the neighboring board. And very fast, the third board of that day. So, now that we have some floor panels in, I want to take some time to check something which I have been dreading since the day we got the boat, and that is to check the condition of the muffler here, the wet exhaust underneath. It seems to be completely rusted, so what I want to find out is, are there any holes? Do we need to fix something? Do we need to replace the entire thing? Yeah, those are the questions. Alright, ready? Here we go. Look at this. It's not even attached at all. There you go. Good as new. Hardly any rust at all. So I think we're good. That is of course a joke. The condition is terrible. However, I do believe that it's only on the surface. And I'm gonna go ahead and poke around a little. Gonna clean this up a little bit and then we will see if there are any holes. Yeah, so there you have it. I guess sometimes it's better not to look. But seriously, I think it's good to know the condition that it's in. I do believe we can actually go underwater like this. It sounds like the thickness is enough, but for the time being, I'm gonna let this rest as it is and continue with the floor and other projects. Alright, so we have 3 boards in. And next I'm gonna work on this one, which is arguably the most difficult one. And I've been thinking for a while how to do this, because the challenge is that we have these 2 pillars here, which obviously prevent me from making a single piece. The fact that there's this pipe there also makes it a bit difficult in certain ways. There's no perfect way to do this. Maybe there is. Anyway, I've thought of something and I'm just gonna do it and let's see if it works. Once again, I use a big piece of cardboard to cut out a template first. Which I then transfer onto the piece that I'm gonna cut. To my big relief, the first little test fitting revealed that the piece would actually fit in that space. Then again, I went back and forth test fitting and trimming, which I'm gonna spare you the details, until at some point the piece fit perfectly. Then it was time to cut the second piece, which I already had from the leftover from cutting the first piece. All I had to do is cut out the grooves for these pillars. And there you go. I then cut and fit the next couple of boards, which by now I could do in a heartbeat after all this practice I have had so far. And don't worry, we'll move on to some other jobs I did in this week in just a moment, so please hang on for a while. But first I had to remove all the boards again for the next segment. So I want to quickly take this opportunity to explain you the concept of how we thought to put down this floor. Namely, we have these narrow pieces of wood, which is the same kind of wood as the main floor plates, which we're gonna cut and trim to fit exactly on top of these angle profiles. And this will, for one, this will dampen a little the wood so that it doesn't touch directly on the bare metal, and at the same time it gives us some leverage because some of these angled profiles are not entirely flat, so we're gonna have to chip away some material underneath here, and I hope that the thickness of this will give us the leverage so that we can achieve an entirely level structure for the floor plates. I still need to figure out exactly how to attach those narrow pieces of wood onto the angled profiles, but for now I just cut them to fit so that I can put the floorboards back onto them and see what it will look like a bit closer to the final result. And that's where we are at with the floorboards at the end of this week. Alright, now let's move to an entirely different area of the boat, namely here in the engine room, where the condition is, other than the paint job we did, mostly unchanged from the very first day we got the boat. What are we doing here, you ask? Well, just look around. You see all those random pipes hanging around? All these messy cables? Is that how you want to run the electronics of your new boat? I don't think so. The question is, of course, where to start and how to go upon this in the first place. I kind of want to avoid just to cut everything and rip everything out, because there might be something useful in the end, maybe. But then again, if I look at this mess, it's gonna take me hours just to trace back certain wires and figure out what they do. Plus, none of the wires fulfill the marine standards. What I do have to be very careful about are certain wires and cables that come from the engine. And of course, they mix up with all the other cables. In several areas I found standard household screw terminals, like here on one of the bilge pumps of all places. In this form, an absolute no-go on a boat. Here are a couple more examples of some creative wiring. This is one of the battery terminals. And then of course there's this one. I'm also gonna remove and replace some of the above waterline through hulls and sea cocks. This is one of the old main bilge pumps. And I'm guessing this was supposed to be an air vent for the engine. Alright, now let's get started. Let's first untangle these wires by removing those hundreds of cable ties. Here I'm freeing up and removing the old water pump. Oh, and before I start cutting any wires, I mustn't forget about those AC wires that are hot and run through the boat at this moment. There are two right here, a black one and a white one. So after I identified and marked them, I went on with untangling the wires. Hey, thank you for sticking around until now, by the way. Making these videos twice or 3 times as long means that I'm also working on them 2 times or 3 times as long. So I really appreciate and thank you for watching until the end. So, moving on with the works here. By this point I started cutting and removing big bundles of wires. This is the 1-2 both battery switch with those totally corroded big DC wires. Right, now let's move on to, I guess, what we could call the DC panel area. In this area we not only have the big mess like in the engine room, but it's also really hard to get to anything because it's in this enclosed space. And I have to admit that by this point I got a little carried away. My tolerance for preserving cables was very low, so I ended up cutting a bunch of the engine wires. Definitely not gonna need this old car radio. And now onto the main switch panel. This one was surprisingly neat and organized compared to the rest of the wiring on this boat. But by this point I was in too deep. The only way of doing this was to cut everything and get it all out. And there you have it. The more I look at it, the happier I am that it's finally out. Alright, now, as the last little project for today's video, just to make sure you are fully up to date on everything that happened in this week, I'm gonna show you how I treated the recently welded windows with some filler paste, sanded everything, and put another coat of paint on it. And with that, I'm signing off. Thank you so much for watching. You cannot imagine how much it means to me. Those of you who stayed this long truly have my respect and gratitude. Take care and see you next time.